Hi, this is Paul Solt from iPhone Dev TV. We're continuing the game menus demo, and we're working to build a complete iPhone game from scratch with the ability to show your game, a store, and have a pause menu. And so these are things that you might not think about when you first go to make the game, but they're going to be important when we want to switch between the different screens. So what we have here is a view controller that's going to manage multiple screens. And we're going to go in here and actually edit this, and we're going to add two new methods to load new screens using UIView Containment. And so this is something that I've been playing around with a little bit in Bomb Dodge, and we ran into an issue where it didn't work correctly between the different iPhone screen sizes. I figured it out last night, and I thought I'd just throw together a little tutorial on how to get it working for you as well. So what I'm going to write here is a method that's going to allow me to show a view controller and hide a view controller. And each of these are going to be different screens in the app. We can have them so that they're transparent and you can see behind them, or they can be opaque and you can have totally different content. So we'll have a pause menu that you'll be able to see the game from behind it, but we'll have a store menu that's going to be its own screen and it's going to be totally opaque, so you won't be able to see through it. So to get started, let's write a ShowViewController method. And I like to be verbose here just because I know exactly what's going on when I read the name. So we have our view controller here. And the other method that we're going to add here is a hide view controller. So this is how we can get rid of a different screen. And so these are going to be two helper methods that we'll be using when we get buttons pressed for the things that you see on the screen. So I'll be making the game view controller in a few minutes once we get this code set up, and then we can test it out. So the first thing that we need to do here is we need to say self add, and then there is this method called child view controller, and then we just pass the view controller that's our parameter right here. So that'll get passed in. And then what we can do is say self.view add subview, and we're going to grab the view from the view controller. Every view controller has a view, and the view is basically what you see on the screen. So after we do that, our last step that we need to do is say view controller did move to parent view controller. So we have to tell the view controller that we're presenting that it's been moved to this other view controller. And that's the gist. Now we can do some animation, which we'll do next once we have another screen to show. So before we jump into the animation, I don't want to write code that's not going to be visual yet until we have something to show. So the next step is to show or disappear a view and make it disappear. And so here what we need to do is we say view controller, which is our parameter that we're passing in this method, will move to parent view controller, and here we pass nil. So this is how we clean up something that's on the screen, and then we say view controller remove from parent view controller. After we do that, the last step is to remove it from the SuperView. So we'll ask the view controller's view to remove from SuperView. So that's the gist for getting started. And then again, we can do animation once we have something to show. So we're going to start with the play button being pressed. That's going to create a game controller. So that's our next step. We want to create a game controller, and then we also want to create a store controller, but I'll probably do that in another video to keep this one shorter. All right, so let's go ahead and add a new file. I'm going to right click over here and just say new file. And we'll do an Objective-C class. Now, I'm going to be leveraging the auto creation of the XIB file here to create these new screens. I'm not going to use the storyboard file. I find this a lot more convenient for managing all of my game's UI so that I can see them in one file rather than have to sort of scroll around a really big file. So we need to subclass the UIViewController, and we can also create the XIB interface. On the top, I'm going to call this our GameViewController. So this is going to have all of the logic for our game. We might embed a Cocos 2D game here. We might embed the sprite kit stuff here. This is basically our canvas and our screen for visualizing everything about the game. So we'll also create the XIB file for just the iPhone. You can do iPad if you want to. I'm going to keep it simple and stick to iPhone. So we do that. We add this to our project, make sure it's in the target, and hit create. And with that, we have our new screen. So there's going to be a little bit of setup. Let's just do that pretty quickly. All we need to do is change the color so it's obvious that we've got a new screen. I'm going to go with a green background. And I want to make sure that the orientation is set to landscape because that's going to be the orientation of our game. And we'll have one button in the top corner. This is going to be our pause button. So let's go ahead and add our pause button background image, which is that one button image that I provided. So this is something I just made in Photoshop. It's a stretchable image that we can make resize. Now the pause button, I don't want to be super big. I really would like to have a graphic, but I'm just going to go with a button so it's very obvious as to what this is. And I want to make it 40 points big, and we'll just do half the width. So we'll do 70 instead of 140 like we did the other buttons on the main screen. So this is going to be our pause button. Let me just write pause on it. And then I'm going to show you how to hook this button up so that we can connect it to code. So actually, before we do that, let's just present it. So in the ViewController class, we'll just import our new code file so that it knows what we're talking about. So we've got our GameViewController.h file. And in here, we're going to create some instance variables for all of our game controllers. So I don't want to use a property here. I think I just want to use an instance variable just to keep it a little bit more private and protected from everyone else touching it. So this ViewController is basically going to manage all of the different screens in our application, and it's going to be able to transition between them. So we're going to give this all the ownership of all of the screens as well as any of the data that we need to store, for example, with our store screen. So we'll call this GameViewController, and that will create a new instance variable for us. And in the viewDidLoad, we'll just initialize this. So we'll say GameViewController is equal to GameViewController alloc. That gives us the memory location, and then init to initialize it so that it's ready to be used and displayed on screen. Now, when we play something, we want to show it. So let's use our new method we wrote down below and say ShowViewController, and then we should be able to pass in GameViewController. Now with that, let's see if it actually works. All right, so we've got our new ViewController. There was no animation, so it was very abrupt, which is fine. We have a pause button, but we have no way to get back right now. And so that's something that we'll have to work on in a bit. So now I guess what's next is if I want to continue that hierarchy, I need to create the pause screen. And so that'll be another controller that we'll need to create. I guess before we do that, I want to finish this out and actually add the animations so that it actually looks a little bit more pleasant. Now, there's a couple ways we can add these animations. Since we're doing this UIView containment, the UIViewController containment, we're not going to get any of the standard animations that you would get. And we're going to actually have to do all of the animations ourselves. But it's actually pretty simple to do, and we're going to get started right here. So what I want to do is I want to set the ViewController's alpha to 0. And I'll just say ViewController.view.alpha, which is its transparency, and I'll say 0. 0 means that it is completely transparent. We won't be able to see it. Now what we'll do is I will create a UIView animation block. So we have these UIView animation blocks that we can do. And I think I just need this one. And just give a time interval, 0.5 seconds. This is in seconds, or duration is a NS time interval. That's going to be 0.5, so half a second. Should look pretty good. Any quicker than that is going to be really abrupt as a screen transition. You might even go as slow as 1 second for this, but I think I like 0.5 pretty well. Now, all I need to do in here is say ViewController.view.alpha is equal to 1, and then we can go ahead and stop and rerun and see how this looks. And now we have that half a second transition. So that looks pretty cool. Another thing you might want to try out when you're doing this, actually there is a thing I left out, is to animate the actual scroll position. And what I mean by that is where it's going to show up. So there is one other thing that we do need to set, and depending on how we do the animations, that's why I've left it out until now. And this will fix the issue that we have with different size screens. So if we go stop this, we may or may not see an issue here. It's hard to tell right now. So I'm just going to show you what we need to do. All right, so I want to animate it from off screen. So off screen coordinate. And we're going to go above the top. So in order to get that, I need to create a CG rect, and we're going to set this to the ViewController's frame attribute. So view.frame. So in the view, we set this to CG rect make, and we'll go for this top one, and it's going to get a little bit lengthy, so I'm going to slide these out. And then in here, we're going to do CG rect get min X. And actually, this is the preferred way rather than using some of the other ways you'll see on Stack Overflow or other things like that. So we'll do self.view.bounds. So this is basically the same as doing something like self.view.bounds.origin.x. Apple actually recommends that you use these methods here to get the values because it does some extra stuff that you wouldn't get if you just accessed it directly. So now what I'm going to do is on a new line, we'll do the next part. So CG rect get, and here I want to get the height actually. And so what I'm doing is I'm trying to create a rectangle that's going to be above the actual screen. So we're trying to get an off-screen area. And so we'll pass in the bounds again. So the bounds is basically a rectangle that represents our screen. So we can see the screen here. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a rectangle above it. So it's going to be the same height. It's going to be at the same X coordinate, but we need to move the Y coordinate up. And so if we look right here at this corner is actually 0, 0. And this corner down here, the Y coordinate actually increases. And so in order to make the Y coordinate go up, we need to subtract it, or we need to invert the height. So we need to move it off screen a bit. And so I'll just make sure that this is negative, and that'll move us up. All right, so next up is our width. And so we can just use CG rect get width, self.view.bounds. And at any point, you can always pause the video if you need to catch up. And then this last one is CG rect get height, self.view.bounds. So the reason I'm putting all of this stuff in this order is because the CG rect make, if I hold the option key and click on it, has the X coordinate, the Y coordinate, the width, and the height. So we'll see a lot of this anytime we kind of do a frame animation or we have to set the frame. And this will set up our thing. So if we go ahead and run this right now, it's going to look awful because we won't see anything. It's actually on top, but it's up here, so we can't see it. So it's moved off screen. If I divide this by 2, you should be able to see it. So let's just show you where it is. And now we can see half of the screen is covered. We can no longer hit the play button. So we're just doing some math here to bump that up. And then what we need to do is in our animation block, if we just change this frame, it will actually slide it in automatically for us. And so the thing that we need to use here is self.view.bounds. So if we go ahead and use that, we see it slides down from the top, and that's pretty cool. Now, if you used frame here, so there's a bounds and there's a frame. If we use frame here, it would be weird. It's actually in a portrait orientation. So the frame on the main view is going to be standing up like this. It's like the iPhone was rotated. And this is actually one of the issues that we ran into when we were updating our user interface, is it was doing the wrong thing, and it's because you need to use bounds. So don't use frame. And that will fix all of your bugs that we ran into with our game. So that is animating it on screen and off screen. If you don't like that transition, you can always comment out this, but we do need this code to always run. So sometimes, so if you don't do this line, you'll have to make sure that you set your frame up top. Always set the frame. So you could comment out all of this animation code if you wanted to, like this, and run it. And what we always want to do is set the maximum here. If I don't set this frame, let me show you what happens. And I'm showing you because this was super frustrating. Let's see if I can repro the bug. So if I select this and I make it iPhone 4, so it's a 3.5-inch screen, that's going to shrink everything. And if I hit play, you'll notice that it doesn't take up the full view. And so what we need to do here is we need that line of code to set the frame. So even if you don't do an animation, you always want to set the frame when you present using the containment APIs because the frame will be incorrect. So that's how to fix that issue. And then if we want to animate, I'll just uncomment this. So I'm using the hotkey commands /. You should be able to get to that right in here. We have uncomment selection. It's a little bit glitchy. You need to make sure you do it only on lines that have been commented or it doesn't work. And so that's how we do that. If I wanted it to slide in from the bottom, I could do something like this where I get the height and it will come up from the bottom. So that's how we can sort of play around with the animation. And you can go ahead and fool around with that. It's kind of fun to make it animate from different areas. All right, so to make this hide, we're going to add a little bit of code down here, and it's going to have to be, we need to be, I guess, a little bit careful about how this is written or things won't look properly. And we'll test it out and make sure that I'm telling you the truth. So let's do a UI view, animate with duration. And I actually do want a completion block. So I'm going to delete that stuff and hit escape. And there's this option with a completion block. So we're going to do 0.5 seconds. The animation block is going to be here. All you do is this up sort of symbol here, and then the brackets. And this next one is actually a little bit different. So we have to actually write bool finished right here. So this is a parameter that's being passed into the block. And then we need to close our front bracket and then add our semicolon. So here we're going to animate, and then when it's finished, we actually want to remove from SuperView down, but I'm not going to do that just yet because I want to see if the issue does appear. So what I want to do first is make the ViewController alpha equal to 0. And we can just try that. Sorry, it's ViewController.view.alpha. So let's stop. And actually, we have no way to hide it. Okay, so we're actually going to need to create some new screens to see all this, or I need to add some delegate protocols. So let's write some code right now. All right, so actually, no, I'll end the video for now. We'll come back, we'll add another screen, and I'll show you how to hide the next ViewController. I want to keep these videos a little bit shorter so that you're not overwhelmed with a ton of stuff in one video. So right now, what we've done is we've added our GameViewController, and we've added methods to make it animate on, and we're working on methods to make it animate off. So that is the starting point.